Is the Russian oil really the bone of contention, or do you think there is more than meets the eye?
President Trump is delusional. The U.S. exercised a dominant power for so long that it thinks it can boss every other part of the world around. This makes no sense. It's not true. It is failing. Putting on this surcharge on India was as stupid as could be from any now. It serves no purposes. Trump hates the Brics. Why? Because they stand up and say to the US, you don't run the world.
He compared tariffs with surgery. He said, and I quote, "The operation is over, the patient lived and is healing." Do you think the surgery went well, sir?
Everything about the tariffs is wrong. It's destructive for the US economy. It violates international law. It is a breakdown of our political system in the United States. Trump's policies are doomed to fail.
How should India deal with Trump?
Don't trust the United States. Don't believe that India is going to slip in and replace China in the global value chain. No way Trump would have that happen. Trump's a protectionist.
If you were Indian Prime Minister, what you would have done?
But I personally would do exactly what Prime Minister Modi's doing. He's flying to meet with President Xi Jinping. He's meeting with President Putin. He's meeting with President Lula. Those are India's real partners.
Is Trump afraid of a trade war with China?
Rare earths, U.S. consumers, U.S. economy. The U.S. can't win a trade war with China.
He wants a peace deal as soon as possible, which is not happening because Putin is not giving him an edge.
Making an ultimatum to Putin when Russia is winning on the battlefield and when the war was provoked by the United States and when to this moment the U.S. will not admit publicly that NATO should not enlarge to Ukraine. Even to this day.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am Yadav and you are watching ANI Interviews. Jeffrey Sachs is an American economist, academic, and author known for his work on global poverty, economic development, and climate change. He is a professor at Columbia University and has advised governments and the UN on sustainable development. Hello, Professor. Thank you. Thank you for having a conversation with ANI. The United States has warned of India of more tariffs if the meeting between President Trump and Putin doesn't go well. How do you see this pressure tactic that if you are not going to accept the ceasefire deals that I have to offer, I'm going to hit your friend?
It's bizarre. Very self-destructive of U.S. foreign policy interests. Years of improving relations between the U.S. and India are being thrown out the window before our eyes. It's a shocking level of incompetence. When I see incompetence in the U.S. government, I'm never surprised, but I'd say that this reaches levels that I have to admit actually surprise me.
I still remember when President Trump was imposing these tariffs on countries, he compared tariffs with surgery. He said, and I quote, "The operation is over, the patient lived and is healing." Do you think the surgery went well, sir?
Everything about the tariffs is wrong in that it's destructive for the U.S. economy. It violates international law. It is a breakdown of our political system in the United States. We have a constitution. We don't have one-person rule. Under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, tariffs are the responsibility of the U.S. Congress. There's actually a lawsuit now in the U.S. Appellate Court which says that Trump has violated the law by imposing these tariffs. There's a real possibility that Trump's entire tariff regime will be deemed, as it should be, unconstitutional. Now, I have to quickly add that our courts are failing us in the United States. We are moving towards one-person rule, so we'll see whether the constitutional order actually holds. But by any sensible and honest jurisprudence, the courts would say that this is a grave overreach of power by one person. You can't just declare an emergency and do what you want in the U.S. constitutional order. But that's exactly what Trump is doing. He's thumbing his nose at the Constitution, at the Congress, and at the courts. And it remains to be seen whether he prevails within the U.S. political system. Having said all of that, from an economic point of view and a geopolitical point of view, Trump's policies are doomed to fail. They will not improve the U.S. economy. They will isolate the United States geopolitically. They will strengthen the Brics and other groups who will say that the United States is not only not an ally, it's unreliable and operates with impunity on its own accord.
Is the Russian oil really the bone of contention, or do you think there is more than meets the eye? Why do you think President Trump is going after Russian oil?
Well, I think there are a few things. First, President Trump is delusional. He thinks he can make demands and that others will accede to it. That's a personal quirk, but it also is an institutional and cultural quirk of the United States more generally. The U.S. exercised a dominant power for so long that it thinks it can boss every other part of the world around. This makes no sense. It's not true. It is failing, but that is a belief both of Trump as an individual and the American political class. The second, it of course does relate to Ukraine in some way, which is that Trump thinks he can dictate the terms of peace. What he can do and should do is to say that the United States is not a party to this war, because the United States not only has been a party to the war in Ukraine, it has been the major provocation of the war. This war came about because the United States attempted to expand NATO and overthrew a Ukrainian government in 2014 for that purpose of NATO expansion. It's a long-term strategy, a reckless and failed one, and it should end. But Trump is not politically smart enough or determined enough or brave enough to end this debacle. So instead, he's trying to beat up on India. There's a third part to it, though. If you look at where the real animus of the United States lies, it is towards Russia, China, India, and Brazil. And South Africa, by the way, though South Africa is less of a great power than the first ones that I mentioned. Trump hates the Brics. Why? Because they stand up and say to the U.S., you don't run the world. The world is multipolar. We want to cooperate with you, but we don't want you to run the world. President Lula summarized it best. He said, we don't want an emperor. This is basically the point. Trump thinks he's an emperor. The U.S. is not the world imperium, though it thinks of itself in that way. And this is partly animus against the Brics. I have said this for many years in India. I warned Indian leaders, if I could put it that way, who said, well, this relationship with the U.S. is good, it's strategic, it's important. I was never a fan of India saying, for example, that it would be part of the Quad. I think this is a very bad idea. I think India is so big, so important, such a great power. It should say, we don't ally with the United States against China. We have our own relations. We need our bilateral relations with China. We don't join a U.S. clearly military group that is an anti-China initiative. I think in any event, India and China need to work out their bilateral relations, because if they could get on a stable basis, nothing could be better for the world than a good, strong, positive relations between China and India. So all of this, I was saying for a long time, don't trust the United States. Don't believe that India is going to slip in and replace China in the global value chains. No way Trump would have that happen. Trump's a protectionist. India's not going to see a massive expansion of Indian exports to the U.S., even if they're merely replacements of China. Trump is a protectionist. and an unreliable trade counterpart. So in any event, what's happened has surprised me because it's so clumsy, so self-destructive of U.S. objectives, but it doesn't surprise me from any fundamental values point of view, because from a fundamental point of view, America was not the trustworthy partner of India. India needs its own foreign policy, not as a somehow under the U.S. wing. That's absurd.
Professor, in your opinion, how should India deal with Trump? Here in India, some opposition leaders have asked Prime Minister Modi to hit back and slap retaliatory tariffs. Is India in a position to do that? If you were Indian Prime Minister in a hypothetical world, if you were Indian Prime Minister, what you would have done?
Well, first of all, none of this is a final story because maybe the summit in Alaska is a love fest, and Trump says, I suspend temporarily any surcharges on India because of the good outcomes in Alaska. Everything's possible. So I think India's right. Take a deep breath. Don't do anything dramatic. Don't get too vituperative. But I personally would do exactly what Prime Minister Modi's doing. He's flying to meet with President Xi Jinping. He's meeting with President Putin. He's meeting with President Lula. Those are India's real partners, by the way. Why? Not only is the Brics plus the fast-growing part of the world, the more dynamic part of the world economy, but it's also the part of the world that says, we don't want an emperor. We want multipolarity and we want multilateralism. So I'm a believer in the BRICS. As I said, I'm a believer in India and China solving its real issues between the two. Because if there was strong trade, mutual respect, the settlement of the Himalayan border issues and so forth between the two, this would unleash a huge amount of economic progress, mutual investment, mega trade, tourism, wonderful things. And I like it because for the rest of the world, you'd have two countries that constitute almost 40% of the world population working together to make a new multilateralism, which I think we really need also. So I think if India and China get together, it's much safer for me as an American, a much more sensible world than the delusion of a US-led world. So all of this is to say, the real message is not vituperation and beating the drums and so forth. I would be careful right now. Trump can change his mind, and the tariffs have not exactly gone into effect, at least as I understand it. There still is the summit meeting ahead. But I certainly would strengthen the BRICS relationship, because India's been a little bit cautious about that. Well, we don't want to get too close because America's our friend. I think the message from all of this is really the BRICS is India's friend. It is. Why? Because it is the basis of a new multilateralism. And China's not the enemy. Russia is certainly a normal partner of India in many different dimensions, in trade, in oil, in military and security, in the BRICS diplomacy and so forth. So all of this is to say, I would pursue active diplomacy. Fortunately, the India-China relations, I think, are getting on a better track, and I would try to pursue that. I'm saying to the Chinese, support India as the sixth permanent member of the UN Security Council, then we really have it made, because then we really create the multilateralism that's needed. So I want China to reach out to India the same way that India should reach out to China. But I think the message is clear. The Quad, I don't like it. Don't play games with the U.S. vis-a-vis China. Don't expect to be the replacement of China in the U.S. supply chains. Don't look to the U.S. market as the main export market for India. It's not. It's going to be the rest of the world outside of Europe and the US that will be the fast growing part of the world based strategy on that.
How do you, Professor, describe Trump's mind? Is he truly somebody's friend? And why is he so unhappy with India? Do you think after Operation Sindoor, he made so many claims that I brokered the peace between India and Pakistan, which New Delhi denied multiple times? Do you think it did not sit well with him because he is someone who is wanting to have a peace, Nobel Peace Prize? Pakistan has backed him, Armenia has backed him, and Azerbaijan is backing him. And does he really want a peace prize, or he's someone who just wants a transaction? Everything for him is just a profit and loss.
It's the latter. And India does not loom as large in Trump's mind as it does in the mind of Indians. So from everything that's happening in the last days and weeks, it looks like Trump is ganging up on India. But I think it's important to understand Trump is ganging up on everybody. Trump has no friends. He threatens. He could have followers. He could have temporary partners in something, but he's not even temperamentally, psychologically, someone who has friends. Even it's said in general of countries, countries don't have friends, they have interests. Trump's interests overwhelmingly are his personal wealth and global adulation. I don't believe, I argue with people, I had an argument yesterday with a very knowledgeable, interesting person. I say Trump has no strategy. He said, no. He's got backers who are thinking very strategically. I said, no, I don't believe it. Strategy means you understand, you take into account long-term ramifications, you look at the implications of your moves. To my mind, putting on this surcharge on India was as stupid as could be from any count. It serves no purposes, to my mind. Making an ultimatum to Putin when Russia is winning on the battlefield and when the war was provoked by the United States, and when to this moment the U.S. will not admit publicly that NATO should not enlarge to Ukraine. Even to this day, they say it a little bit privately under their muffled voice, but publicly they won't tell the truth because this is a long-term U.S. deep state project. And this means to make threats to Putin under these conditions is not a strategy. It's not even a tactic. It's just a blunder. And so my view is Trump is not strategic. He's not tactical. Okay, he's president. It's true. He must have some tactics. I'm not president. He is. But I don't find what he's doing serving any real strategic interests of the United States, of the American people, or even being on the positive side. Now, that also may sound strange. Do countries do things that are self-destructive? Yes, when they don't know what they're doing. And unfortunately, the United States has not had a coherent foreign policy for even America's own interests, in my view, for many decades. America really was the unipolar power briefly in the early 1990s. Look at what it has squandered in goodwill, in capacity in shaping the international environment. It's a lot of self-inflicted defeats, and I think Trump is just adding to them.
Asim Munir's Pakistan Army chief's growing closeness to the US and Trump. Just a couple of days back, he even threatened India with nuclear strikes. How can India ignore this? Do you think it is something where should India draw the line and should not ignore such threats coming from Pakistan's army chief?
Look, all problems between India and Pakistan, or India and China, or the US and China, or anyone, need to be addressed mainly on a bilateral basis. And countries like the US or the British Empire before that did not mind turmoil. Divide and conquer is the most famous strategy of empire. And so if India and Pakistan are in increased tensions, the U.S. in this weird way looks on and says, good for us. We get to manipulate more. Maybe India will crawl back, and accept our demands or whatever it is. Again, I don't want to be naive or simplistic. If we had hours, we could discuss everything, but I do, and I have long believed that India and Pakistan need a bilateral sorting out of very difficult issues that are very dangerous. Obviously, they've reached to the level of war recently, but they will never be solved by the United States. And I wouldn't let the United States in between the Pakistan-U.S. India issues. In other words, I wouldn't say if we can just get the U.S. on our side or the U.S. is on Pakistan's side. The real issues between India and Pakistan are bilateral, and they can never be anything but bilateral, actually. And even with China in there, even with the U.S., don't let other major powers create a worsening spiral, because outside powers destabilize, they don't stabilize regions. And India and Pakistan are two nuclear powers at each other's throats, very dangerous, and it needs bilateral sorting out. It's not easy, by the way, no question about it, but it cannot be done at the White House, but at the same time, obviously not, but at the same time, don't let any lunch at the White House or statements at the White House create a reaction. The U.S. is essentially irrelevant to the India-Pakistan issue. This is my main.
Professor, a while back you were mentioning Brics and you said I would put my bet on Brics. It is the future. And Trump is really after Brics. He called it a just little group. Do you think, is it possible that Brics can challenge America's dominance? And can we talk about de-dollarization also? Is it possible?
Yes and yes. It's not even a close call. America is not dominant over the Brics. It isn't. This is the reality that we're already seeing. The Brics is a much larger economy in the aggregate, much larger than the United States, much more important in trade, much more advanced in many technologies, by the way. And the dollar dominance is going to end within the next 10 years, actually. The main way it's going to end is through internationalization of the renminbi, because that will happen and play a larger role. But that's not the fundamental point. The fundamental point is the U.S. is now maybe 14% of the world economy measured at purchasing power prices. It's something roughly similar, a little bit smaller in terms of international trade. It is not dominant in most technologies, though it's not bad in a lot of areas. And you can't, on that basis, especially with an erratic foreign policy, with a lot of hostility that it's created, and by the way, with a huge U.S. budget deficit that's not getting better anytime soon. So our own finances are in disorder. With all of that, you can't say that the U.S. is going to sustain the dominance of the international financial system. Technology is not hard to create non-dollar payments, non-dollar settlements, non-dollar financing. And I think it's going to come faster than people think.
Is Trump afraid of a trade war with China? Trump has just extended the China trade truce for next 90 days. Right now, he's not waging a trade war with China. What is in his mind that he doesn't want to show his cards right now? The China playbook is not ready, or he wants to wait and watch and then show his cards. What is in his mind related to China?
Rare earths, U.S. consumers, U.S. economy. No, the U.S. can't win a trade war with China. Not even close.
It's as simple as that.
Yes, it went down after 2 days the first time around. China said no, and the US said, okay, we'll delay it.
Professor, how do you see India's economy performing in the next 5 or 7 years if the tariffs stay as it is? Because to be honest, it is going to impact India's economy a lot. Jobs are connected, money is connected, and a lot of traders are connected. They are also worried. How do you see India's economy gonna do in the next 5 to 6 years if the tariff remains as it is?
The US has closed the market to China effectively already for many years. China's exports are still growing significantly because China reoriented its trade. It's doing a lot more trade with ASEAN. It's doing a lot more trade with other parts of the world. That is what I would recommend for India as well. I hope that the surcharges will go away. I think there's some chance that they will. But even if they do, India should not rely on the US and Europe as the main markets for export growth over the next 5 to 10 years. Because both the US and Europe are slow growing economies. They're advanced economies that are mature and I wouldn't say stagnant. Europe is maybe stagnant because of all the crises underway. But they're not the fast growing part of the world. Fast growing part of the world is the emerging economies. And I would recommend that India take a look once again at RCEP. RCEP, of course, is the 15 economies, including China, Japan, Korea, ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand. It should be 16, in my view. India should be part of that. And that would be a very dynamic way to grow for years to come. India has lots of domestic investments that are needed, a massive infrastructure in many, many areas in the power sector and transport and fast rail. India doesn't have fast rail. China has 50,000 kilometers of fast rail. India should, by the way, because India is so densely populated. Rail is the right mode of intercity transport, and it should be fast rail. Well, that's a lot of investment and a lot of growth ahead as well. So I think India needs a strategy that does not depend on export growth to the US market. Fortunately, you're in the fast-growing part of the world. India should be achieving about 7% per year GDP growth in the coming decade. It can do that. But to do that, trade with China, trade with ASEAN, deepen the relations in East Asia, export to Africa, by the way, because India has a lot that Africa can use. India is way ahead, of course, on the digital economy in exactly the way that Africa needs it. So focus less on the US, focus more on the emerging economies, focus on the neighborhood, and focus on upgrading the internal infrastructure and upgrading the investments in education and skills in India.
A team from the USA is all set to come here in India in the last week of August. Do you think a deal should be made? Do you think something is going to happen? Or Trump is just still testing waters or making sure that India should step down and be ready to open its agriculture market and dairy markets, which India is never going to do because it's going to wipe out millions of jobs. The farmer will have no job, will have no money. So India can never do that. Do you think Trump is still testing waters and waiting for India to bow down?
Yes, and India will not. And the actions of the last couple of weeks make it impossible for India to do so, even if there was any inclination to do so beforehand, because now it's absolutely clear to India, you can't rely on the United States no matter what's agreed. So India needs to have an overall strategic policy which is different perhaps from what some thought a month or two ago. The U.S. is not the route to India's prosperity and security. A multipolar world is. That means a different strategy.
Professor, I want to mention one incident. An ANI reporter from our news agency asked Donald Trump in the White House are you aware of the US imports of Russian uranium and fertilizers? And Trump replied, I do not know anything about it. I have to check. Is he really unaware of US imports of uranium and fertilizers and what EU is doing since the war began? EU has imported more than $100 billion of gas, energy. Is he really unaware of the facts that are in front of everyone to see?
This may be one of those few cases where I would take Donald Trump at his word. If he says he doesn't know something, I believe him.
Does he even have good advisor as far as India is concerned? Or they really don't care about India and they just see India as a country that they can bend at their will, which is never going to happen.
It's a small team. It's not a well-informed team. It's not a group that has respect for the rest of the world. It's not a group that thinks that you have to prepare for the rest of the world. They don't have experts on China. They don't have experts on India. They don't have experts on Russia. Honestly, this is I can't use the words I would normally use, but they don't know what they're doing. This is improv, and it plays well in the 24-hour news cycle. It plays well for Trump's followers on social media. It plays okay in the U.S. political class, which is quite ignorant. But no, they do not have any deep advisors on any of this stuff. This is a pickup team.
Professor, Trump has chosen his golf partner Witkoff as a special envoy to, deal with the negotiations as far as Putin is concerned. Putin is coming to Alaska. It does show that Trump is really consistent and concerned about a peace deal. He wants a peace deal as soon as possible, which is not happening because Putin is not giving him an edge. Putin is saying that I will agree when I want to agree. How do you see it panning out? Do you see a ceasefire deal happening at the Alaska summit without having Zelensky on board? And if I may recall, a couple of months back, when EU pushed Trump to send defense equipments and to change his stance as far as Zelensky and Ukraine is concerned, because he said, I'm not going to send defense equipments, I'm not going to do anything, Zelensky has to sign that deal. But then European leaders got together and showed some sort of camaraderie with Zelensky, and they made sure that Trump moved back from his stance. Do you think that this is going to happen if Zelensky is not going to agree with the deal?
This is exactly the situation. Ukraine is a project of the U.S. military-industrial complex, meaning that going back to the 1990s, the idea was get Ukraine on our side. And our side means many things. It meant the expansion of Europe institutions, but it also meant the expansion of the U.S. military, and that meant NATO enlargement. The project is 30 years. It was never going to happen because you look at a map, the Russian power structure would never allow Ukraine to become a member of NATO. This is ridiculous. And I don't think India would love if the U.S. started establishing military bases in the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh or in some neighborhood, or it suddenly announced that with Bhutan, a military agreement that there's going to be a major NATO base in Bhutan. It would not play well, no matter who was friends with whom. But the United States thought that they could get away with it. And that is basic imperial arrogance. And basically that came from Britain, which taught America how to be an empire. Now, it was doomed to fail. It's failing. Trump kind of knows it's failing. He doesn't care about Ukraine. He doesn't care about any of this. So he wants to get out of it. So I think he probably really does want to get out of it. But when he says, I want to get out of it, then the whole military-industrial complex, which runs the U.S. system, says, no, you can't say that. That's appeasement. That's showing your weakness. What's China going to think? Blah, 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 blah. And the European leaders, they seem to prefer an ongoing war to a neutral Ukraine. I think they're crazy for thinking this. The neutral Ukraine is a good buffer between Russia and the European Union. But they don't want a buffer. They also got intoxicated with the idea that Europe extends where we want Europe to extend, even to the South Caucasus, which, if you ask any geographer, is not even in Europe, it's in Asia. And so this is Trump, if he were really smart and clever and had an experienced team, he would have made a speech to the American people. And he would have explained, this was a mistaken policy. We need to find a peaceful direction. NATO doesn't have to be there. Ukraine can be secure as a neutral country, indeed more secure than as a battleground of a proxy war. If he were a leader, he would do that. If he were Eisenhower or Kennedy, that's what would happen. We haven't heard a word from him like that. That's not what true social is about. True social is you make a demand. You have 10 days. Unconditional this, unconditional that. I don't think, unfortunately, Trump has the capacity to be a real leader. So that's the problem. Now, the point that I'm making is that when you have a 30-year project of the deep state, it doesn't go away easily. And presidents are not all powerful because they can be called appeasers. They can be attacked as being weak and so forth. That's why Trump looks like he bounces back and forth. I like Putin. I hate Putin. I'm disappointed in Putin. I make demands. Instead of a coherent strategy. Now, some people say, as I mentioned to you earlier, oh, you don't know how to negotiate, Jeff. Trump's just negotiating. He's keeping everyone unstable. Well, yes, he is doing that. But I think the real instability is the United States, not the rest. I think the one that is unstable is the United States.
Professor, at last, I want to ask you, if you were the president of the United States of America, what you would have done as far as tariffs are concerned, Ukraine war is concerned, and Gaza is concerned. All three fronts, I want to know your opinion, what you would have done if you were sitting at the helm of America.
I would have bolstered the World Trade Organization, reestablished its appellate court, said we need multilateralism and an open trading system. I would have announced that NATO is not going to enlarge eastward anymore, that Russia understandably views this as a security threat. We are not going to support a war in Ukraine anymore, and there needs to be an end of the fighting. And in Gaza, I would have announced immediately the U.S. recognition of a state of Palestine on the borders of the 4th of June, 1967. And I would have called for the UN Security Council to admit Palestine as the 194th member state and to move on to the two-state solution, which is based on international law. So I would have done all of those things probably in the first day. and I think the world would be a more stable, prosperous, and safer place with those.
Thank you, Professor. Thanks a lot for having a conversation with ANI. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.